We are live. It's the Revved Up 906 podcast, a Detroit Pistons podcast to be exact. And I'm Hudson.
And I'm Ryan.
And before we get into episode number 22 of season 3, got to talk to you, the people, about a few quick things. First off, if you are new to the channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you happen to be tuning into this week's episode, but you're not so much into long form content, make sure to follow us on Instagram. And you can do that by finding the Instagram link in the description below this video. Click that link, hit the follow button, and be in the know with everything going on with the Detroit Pistons each and every week. We try to get some debate topics, hot takes. We try to do 3 to 4 clips each and every week. So you can still be in the know with everything going on with the Pistons without tuning in to our weekly episodes on YouTube. So make sure to follow us on Instagram if you haven't yet already. And we are in the midst of our season evaluation series, talking about each and every player. So a lot to be talked about today. If you have any comments, questions, hot takes, make sure to comment below in the comment section. We'd love to know what you guys have to say. Just because we are the ones making notes, talking about things, doesn't mean that we don't want to hear your opinion. We'd love to know what you guys have to say. And if you happen to like this series, comment below and subscribe. Without further ado, let's get into episode number 22 of season 3. And we got a good one for you guys. Continuing our season evaluation series, we are going to be talking about Holland, Tobias Harris, and Tim Hardaway Jr. And Ryan, this is going to be a fun episode because we get to talk about 3 new Pistons and 3 players that made a big impact on this year's team. You know, Holland in his rookie year was a big hot topic when he was taken with the 5th pick in this year's draft. Tobias Harris, Tim Hardaway Jr., big free agent signings. 2 of Trajan Langdon's first moves as the head honcho with the Detroit Pistons. And these were 3 of his main decisions when he took over in the offseason for the Pistons. And they all did very well for the Detroit Pistons. But we're going to start off with talking about Tim Hardaway Jr. and his season evaluation. He's a veteran that added a 3-point presence that was so needed for this Detroit Pistons team. But we are going to, with each and every player, talk about season averages, defensive impact, positives and negatives, best game of the season, talk about like some niche statistics about each and every player. And then when we wrap up, we will give the final grade for each and every player. So starting off with Tim Hardaway Jr., his season averages with the Detroit Pistons. Tim Hardaway Jr. averaged 11 points, 2.4 rebounds, 1.6 assists per game in 77 games, playing 28 minutes per game. His shooting percentage was around 40.6% from the field, 37% from the 3-point line, and 85% from the free throw line. Ryan, Tim Hardaway Jr. offered everything for the Detroit Pistons. It wasn't just the 3-point shot. It was also defensively. And also, as a guy that's kind of getting into the later range of his career, to play 77 games out of 82 is really impressive. Ryan, when watching Tim Hardaway's season with the Pistons, looking at his averages, what are some of your first thoughts of what we saw from Tim Hardaway?
We saw a guy that pretty much honestly got written off following last season with the Mavericks. Everybody figured, okay, this is it for Tim Hardaway Jr. He didn't really do anything for us as far as the Mavericks goes. But keep in mind, Nico doesn't know what he's doing because he traded Luka. The point is, nobody knew what to expect out of Tim Hardaway this year. And honestly, when Langdon pulled off that trade, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, okay, this could be something. Because I never thought that Hardaway was done for. I thought he still had gas left in the tank. So going into this year, I didn't know what to expect. But he did what he was supposed to do. He came in and did exactly what JV wanted and exactly what Langdon wanted. And actually, he did more than that. Because if we look back at Ivy going down, and actually, if you go before Ivy went down, Hardaway was doing what you were expecting out of him. He was doing the 10 plus points a night, doing this, that, and the other thing. But then as soon as Ivy went down, we needed a guy to step up into that spot. And we're going to talk about Ron Holland here shortly, and he's a key contributor to that too. But I think the way that Tim just assumed that role, went in there, was the head honcho, was taking care of business on the offensive end and defensive end, and really stepped up in clutch situations when we needed him to. Because there were times where Cade wasn't hot, or there was times where Tobias wasn't hot, or Malik Beasley, or countless others. And Tim Hardaway needed to step up. And it wasn't just stepping up offensively, he was stepping up defensively too. So I think the impact that he had as soon as Ivy went out is what to me is like the biggest, like, oh yeah, he had a good season.
So last year on the Mavericks, you mentioned his stint with Dallas. He averaged 14 points per game, 3 rebounds, nearly 2 assists in 79 games. So why I bring that up is we did see a bit of a decline in Hardaway's scoring and rebounding. And what we did see as far as improvements was shooting efficiency. And that's exactly what you want to see from a veteran on a young Pistons team. We're going to talk about Tobias in a couple minutes. His efficiency was great too. So I don't think we were expecting Tim Hardaway Jr. to have as many starting minutes as he ended up having in the absence of Jaden Ivey. And when talking about filling a role like a young juggernaut of Jaden, we don't necessarily need him to be an offensive juggernaut like a Jaden Ivey, like a Cade Cunningham. We need him to be efficient and consistent. And that's what Tim Hardaway Jr. offered to this Detroit Pistons team that was oh so needed. We know that Cade is going to give us 25 a night, maybe 30 a night. Tim Hardaway Jr., what he needs to do is come in and supply consistent shooting. And that's what he did time and time again. And I think, we talked about last week how Malik Beasley was such a key part of why the Pistons won. And a big contributor and a big check mark of why the Pistons won was because of Tim Hardaway Jr. coming in each and every night, shooting his 5-6 threes a night on an average, and making nearly half of those each and every night. And I think it proved to be really, really big for the Detroit Pistons, especially when they went up against the Knicks in the Eastern Conference first round. It proved to be very important. Now, when talking about Tim Hardaway Jr., as far as telling the story of his season, you got to talk about the 3-point statistics, because he's not one of those guys that's top echelon of the NBA, but he's one of those guys, if you don't read the scouting report heading into a game against the Pistons, he's going to burn you big time. So I just want to talk about some of the statistics we saw from this season as far as 3-point shooting with Tim Hardaway. This season, Tim Hardaway Jr. ranked 39th in 3-pointers made, connecting on 168 shots from beyond the arc over 77 games, averaging approximately 2.2 made threes per game. He attempted nearly 6 3-pointers per game, placing him 38th in the league for 3-point attempts. His 3-point shooting percentage stood at 36.8%, while slightly above the league average per statmuse.com. While not among the top tier 3-point shooters, Hardaway's consistent perimeter shooting provided a valuable spacing for the Pistons offense throughout the season. So Ryan, when talking about his 3-point shooting, he's not one of the top guys. He's top 40 in the NBA, and out of a couple hundred players, that's not bad. But when talking about his season and alongside this young Pistons team, it proved very valuable for our point guards to have a relief shooter like Tim Hardaway. Cade, when bringing up the ball, doesn't have to worry about driving, doesn't have to worry about the pickup and take that shot himself. He knows that he can get a guy like Tim Hardaway Jr. involved, and that really helped as far as the pacing of an offense that we didn't see from the Pistons in years prior.
Yeah, and to me, honestly, yes, the 3-point shot, he's not like top in the league, right? But you look at what he can do outside of the 3-point shot, and that's why I think spacing-wise, that worked out very well in our favor. Because, yes, we lost Ivy, and yes, he stepped in and took that role over. But Tim Hardaway Jr. is not just a 3-point shooter. There's a reason why he was a top 10 pick in the NBA draft when he got drafted. There's a reason why he was a standout player amongst all of college basketball in Michigan. Go Blue. But he can do not just the 3-point shot, but he's a great slasher. And so the spacing that we needed at times, which it proved evident that we did need it because last year was terrible. This year was phenomenal. But not having Ivy, who's constantly slashing and going towards the rim, hurt us drastically. But then you have Hardaway, who has I would say, a slightly better 3-point shot than Ivy, but obviously isn't as freak of an athlete as Ivy, as just slashing in general. So I think just adding in that dynamic of being able to hit that 3-point shot on a consistent basis, but also you have to watch out for him driving to the rim. I think that's what really did it in for a lot of the teams going up against us. Because, yeah, you'd have times where Cade's out there, Hardaway's out there, and then you'd have Beasley out there too. And in that situation, it's like, who do you guard? Because if you focus in on guarding Malik Beasley with his 3-point shot, you're most likely going to leave Tim Hardaway Jr. or Cade open for 3 too. And if you lock up Cade and try to make sure he does nothing, Beasley can still hit that shot and slash. Tim Hardaway Jr. can still hit that shot and slash. So there's a lot of things, a lot of dynamics that goes into our offense that I think Hardaway filled perfectly. And it's not just because of his 3-point shot. Like, yes, 36% from 3 is actually pretty darn good. There's not a lot of guys that can shoot at that high of a clip. And yes, you're sitting to yourself thinking, okay, 36% really isn't that good. But compared to a lot of the guys in the league, clearly it's pretty darn good because he's in the top 40. And there's over 200, 300 NBA players currently. So with that said, like he's a top tier shooter. Now he's not elite like Beasley. We covered Beasley. Beasley just shot at an elite level this year. Cade has a decent 3-point shot. But I think the dynamic that Hardaway added with not just his 3-point shot, but his driving ability is what really put the nail on the coffin as if you guard him one way, he's going to beat you the other. And I think he filled that role in for Ivy perfectly just because out of anyone on our roster, he was the only one that could have really had done that because he has that size too. He's 6'6". Beasley's not that big. He can't do much there in the height department. But when you have a 6'6" wing that can hit the shot and drive, it's hard to contain that no matter how good you are.
When preparing for today's episode and making the notes, I was looking at the news in the media outlets of what's going on and what's being talked about with Tim Hardaway Jr. And of course, there's the talk, okay, where's he going to end up? Is he going to end up going to the Pistons and being re-signed? But I also saw an interesting article talking about Tim Hardaway Jr. and his relationship with his dad, Tim Hardaway, and how they actually reconciled a father-son relationship during his season with the Detroit Pistons this year. And I thought, yeah, it's a little personal and it's not really talking about the statistics, but I think it's cool when telling the story of Tim Hardaway Jr.'s season of how previous years it was kind of hard for them to have a relationship because of making basketball so professional and taking it so seriously. And Tim Hardaway, after his career in the NBA, having a newfound career in coaching, and him and his son having struggles in their relationship for taking the job too seriously. And if you watched Pistons broadcast this season, you would have noticed that Tim Hardaway was at a lot of the Detroit Pistons games, whether they were on the road or in Little Caesars Arena. So I just want to note that it was kind of cool seeing that, and Tim Hardaway had coached as an assistant with the Pistons for a couple of years, about 10 years ago. So it was cool to see that, on a personal note, Tim Hardaway Jr. and his dad kind of reconcile while Tim was on the Pistons team this season. It's just kind of a cool note. Before we give Tim Hardaway Jr. his final season grade, I want to talk about his best game of the season. His standout performance for the Pistons this year occurred on March 15th, 2025 against the Oklahoma City Thunder, currently in the NBA Finals. In that game, he scored a season-high 32 points, shooting 11 of 27 from the field, including 3 of 7 from the three-point range. He also contributed 1 rebound and 1 assist over 36 minutes of play. Despite his efforts, the Pistons fell short, losing 114-108. May I add, that was a close game. The Pistons competed very well in the favorite to win the NBA Finals this year. Ryan, and what's kind of funny to note too here is he only made three-pointers. So for a guy that's, we think of being a great 3-point shooter and really catch and shoot guy, he scored 32 points on just 3 threes. So that's kind of impressive. Ryan, we talked about the statistics, talked about his 3-point shooting. What final season grade do you give Tim Hardaway Jr.?
Based on what we gave up for him in a trade, which was nothing, and how many the expectations were for this season with Ivy being out, he filling in.
Yeah,
it has to be an A for me. Actually, you know what? My first A plus. I'm going to give an A plus.
Okay. I like it. Yeah, I like the A plus because from what we were expecting, we thought he was going to be another Joe Harris experiment, what we saw 2 seasons ago, where it was like, oh, we signed a vet and then he didn't play at all, where Tim Hardaway Jr. had a very important role on this Detroit Pistons team. And for looking at the statistics, what my expectations were heading into the season, I give him an A, but I definitely don't hate the A plus. He gave a lot of valuable minutes to this Detroit Pistons team that I will always respect what he offered the Detroit Pistons. So there you have it from Ryan, an A plus, from me, an A for Tim Hardaway Jr. and on his 24-25 season with the Detroit Pistons. Let's talk about rookie Ron Holland and his season evaluation. He averaged this year in 81 games, 6.5 points, 3 rebounds, 1 assist, and 47% from the field in 16 minutes per game. And Ryan, we did a video live on the draft, and we watched and had a live reaction to Ron Holland getting drafted with the 5th pick in this year's NBA draft. And he was kind of a favorite for yours on top of your list. What are some of your first thoughts on what we saw from Ron Holland? Because he also gave us some valuable minutes at times.
Yeah, in the early stages of the season, he didn't do much. And that was expected. We didn't expect him to come in and be this stud out of nowhere. We expected there to be some growing pains. And later in the season, towards the end, really, he started getting more minutes in crunch time. And just JB's trust, you saw it. You saw that JB
Totally.
had a lot of faith in his abilities, especially specifically on the defensive end. Let's be realistic here. You're not putting Ron Holland in crunch time for offense. You're putting him in for defense. We all know that. So given the fact of, well, JB, he could have gone anywhere down the line as far as his bench goes, because there's a lot of those guys that, I mean, JB's a very defensive-minded head coach already. And you look down this team in the roster, every one of those guys could honestly go in and play defense at any given moment.
Totally.
So with that in mind, there's not a lot of times you see a rookie get crucial minutes in his first year, let alone in the playoffs of all things, and being a top 5 pick at that too. So we saw just, I would say, growing pains in the beginning, but towards the end, we saw this belief that JB had in a young Ron Holland in those crunch time situations where you needed a defender. He'd be one of those go-to guys. And that's fantastic, because I didn't think he was going to be all that much going into this year. I thought he was going to probably get his minutes here and there, but mainly kind of like hide, per se. Kind of like Marcus Sasser last year, how he got his couple games in here and there, and then really faded away, kind of like Asar Thompson too. Those two last year were kind of like, they got their time and then they faded out for the rest of the season. So I was kind of expecting that. Granted, we have JB right now and not Monty Williams, who sucks. But yeah, so I wasn't expecting much, but what we got, I expected that.
I was pretty happy with what I saw from Ron Holland this season. One thing that impressed me was he found his role as a spark plug off the bench for this Detroit Pistons team. And it can be really hard for a rookie, especially a young rookie, only 18 when he was coming onto the team, to find a role and really thrive in that for a team like the Pistons that was really finding their identity through these 82 games of this season. And I think that's due in part to great coaching by JB Bickerstaff. He really tried to give this team an image and a brand, and Ron Holland was one of those guys that really played well because of that leadership from JB. He just reminds me of a young Dennis Rodman. I like that he has a bit of an edge to him. I like that he fights for rebounds. I like that he runs baseline to catch that lob in transition. I like that he runs in transition defense, tries to get that chase down block. gets in the passing lanes. He just did those defensive niche things really well. And if you look at this Pistons team, Cade is the superstar. Jaden Ivey is the rim rusher. Isaiah Stewart is the enforcer. Jalen Duren is just the paint beast. And then there's a role for Ron Holland to be that spark plug off the bench, get those big transition points, and just really have those plays that give a boost to the offense that every great team needs. And right now, if you look at the great teams right now on the Oklahoma City Thunder, the shooting guard Jalen Williams just really gets out in transition, pushes the offense, makes big plays to make go on runs for that Oklahoma City Thunder team. You look at the Indiana Pacers, Obi Toppin has really turned into that guy for them who gets those big dunks. He makes these crazy threes that shouldn't even be possible, but he makes them. And it just helps the Pacers go on those runs that are needed to win big games. And I think Ron Holland is in the future going to be that guy for the Detroit Pistons. It's just a matter of if he keeps progressing and getting better and better. Ryan, when telling the story of Ron Holland's season this year, you look at the offensive numbers, they're okay. You hope that maybe they'll get better next season. But really, the biggest takeaway is his defense, getting nearly a steal a game off the bench and 0.2 blocks per game. His athleticism and versatility provided valuable depth for the Pistons. And one thing, as far as talking rotation and where Ron Holland fits on this Pistons team, when you have a guy like Asar Thompson in the starting lineup and you add in the second rotation, towards the end of the first quarter, you bring in a guy like Ron Holland alongside Asar Thompson, that just adds a defensive ability that not many teams can have because they're just so suffocating. I think, and I hope that a guy like Ron Holland's going to come in and really pair well with Asar Thompson as just defensive juggernauts. Do you see that in the future with Ron Holland and Asar Thompson?
100%. And I think a big reason for that is because of the offseason. What Asar did going into this season is exactly what I think Ron Holland is going to do, but I think he's going to do a little bit more just because his work ethic is unmatched. Not that that Asar isn't around that same belt too, because Asar is. But I think the difference in last season to this year is who was around team-wise, player-wise, with Asar as far as that veteran leadership. There wasn't much there. And so he didn't really get a whole lot of like, oh, hey, this is how you should do your off season. Whereas Ron Holland has that advantage because he has Tobias Harris, he has Tim Hardaway Jr., he has Malik Beasley, he has countless others that he can lean on and go like, okay, how do I do this the right way? Because I want to make sure I'm to Asar's level, if not better than him defensively come next year. So I think just the vet pieces and the mindset of Ron Holland, I think those two could be a dynamic duo on the defensive end from here on out, because the growth that Ron Holland had from the beginning of the season to the end is just crazy. And just the maturity there alone. He was already mature to begin with, but the amount of growth he had in such a short period of time to go from barely seeing the floor in crunch time to seeing the floor in crunch time situations in the postseason. I think those two next to each other is going to be a tandem that you can't match because there's not a lot of teams in the NBA that are able to get two players that dynamic on the defensive side of the ball.
Ryan, you mentioned before how you were impressed with Ron Holland, not, just becoming a ghost on offense, basically. Like he wasn't getting involved, but you mentioned how he did do a good job of getting in the passing game and swinging the ball to the 3-point line or giving it to Jalen Duren in the paint. And I think that speaks to, like what you said, the maturity of Ron Holland, of how a guy so defensively minded, being able to stay engaged on the offensive end really showed that maturity of Ron Holland. And I think that's going to only get better and better as, his career goes on. And coming into the NBA, the Pistons drafted Ron. I wasn't quite sure what to think about the pick just because he was so similar to Asar Thompson, who we took taken the previous season through the draft. But one thing that impressed me is I heard everyone talking about his defensive ability. He just doesn't give up on a defensive play. I thought he was more defensively sound than I expected when it came to pick and roll, communicating. Hey, the pick is coming here. Pick screen. Being able to communicate, switch off defenders. Also, what was impressive to me, and I always bring it back to the New York Knicks series that the Pistons had a couple weeks ago, just because it proved a lot to me of what the team is capable of, bringing the Knicks to 6 games. He played really well against the Mikal Bridges, against Josh Hart. He just proved a lot to me that he can be very defensively sound without fouling a lot. We didn't really see him deal with a lot of foul issues. He had his games here and there, but as far as being so defensively minded and not dealing with many fouls and staying his wits together, I thought he did a great job. When talking about his best game of the season, Ron Holland had his best game of the season against the New Orleans Pelicans on March 23rd, 2025. Holland delivered a standout performance, scoring 26 points on an efficient 11 of 14 shooting, including a 2 of 5 from the 3-point range. He also contributed 5 rebounds, 6 assists, and a steal in just 20 minutes of play, helping lead the Pistons to a 136-130 victory, per last word on sports.com. That's a stat sheet stuffer if I know one. As far as final season grade for Ron Holland, where's your head at, Ryan? I'm pretty tough on him in this category as far as final season grade. Where's your head
To me, we weren't expecting much out of him this year. And he did a lot of good things. He did a lot of bad things. The bad being offense, good being defense. So he has to be right smack dab in the middle for me. But you can make a case for a D, honestly. But I can't be that hard on him. So I want to give him a C minus.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I'm going to give him a C. C is average. I think he was average. He wasn't standout by any means. Did he play? I wasn't a huge fan of the pick. So going into the season, I was already kind of tough on him as it was. So I think giving him a C is kind of generous from where my head was at the beginning of the season. And he did show me shines of what he could add to this Pistons team. It's just more of, with a Ron Holland, basically a young replica of what Asar Thompson is. Basically, he's setting himself up to be a bench player on this team specifically. So I'm nervous to see what role, if he's able to have a bigger role than just a spark plug off the bench. I'm hoping that he can be more, but based on what I saw this season, I'm going to give him a C. Let's get into Tobias Harris season evaluation. And Ryan, I'm a big Tobias Harris guy. I loved him in his previous stint with the Detroit Pistons. I love him now. Let's get into the season averages. Tobias Harris played 73 games for the Detroit Pistons, averaging 13.7 points, 5.9 rebounds, and 2.2 assists per game, over 31.6 points per game. Ryan, Tobias offered everything that we could want from him and more. What are some of your first thoughts on Tobias Harris's season?
I knew what we were going to get out of him just in general, because if you look at his stats every single season, he averages out pretty much the same exact stat line, which just shows you how crazy good he is. But I knew what to expect, but I didn't know what to expect with his role for our team. I knew the player we were getting, but I didn't know how he would fit with the guys. And he proved me wrong on a lot of notes. And not that I was out for him and not wanting him, but he did so much for this team. And I think, we will always bring it up, at least as far as this season goes, his matchup against Karl Anthony Towns in that round, my goodness, he was out of this world crazy good. The way he was finishing those shots, the way he was backing down Cat in the paint, the way he was playing defense on Cat. Like, Cat, I'm sorry, you're 7 foot plus. There's no reason why Tobias Harris, who's not even close to being 7 foot, is being a bully to you. There's no way that should be taking place. So just the impact that he had on this team for creating a culture that JV Bickerstaff and Trajan Langdon wanted to create, this was the guy to do it. And his stats, yeah, it's not like, whoa, Tobias Harris, you had a phenomenal season. No, but he did. And you don't have to look at the box score. The mentality he brought and the impact that he had was unmatched. I think, to me, the best part of his season for me was the impact that he had.
Yeah, and when talking about the vet presence that Tobias Harris offered the Detroit Pistons this season, for me, in my opinion, what proves to me that they're a great vet is the efficiency and the consistency, like I talked about with Tim Hardaway Jr. So I'm going to highlight his shooting percentage. He shot 47.7% from the field. And as a power forward who doesn't really focus on around the rim shooting, that's just absolutely terrific. Most of his shots are coming from the mid range to the 3-point line. To be able to shoot 47%, my goodness, 34.5% from the 3-point line, who, as a guy that's not really focused on 3-point shooting 34%, I'll absolutely take it. And shooting 86.1% from the free throw line per statmuse.com. Ryan, he did everything that I wanted him to do and more. And coming into the season, I agree. I didn't know where he was going to fit in the rotation. I didn't know with signing Tobias if that meant, okay, Isaiah Stewart's going to be the power forward or whatever's going to happen there. But Tobias Harris set himself up to be the perennial starter for the Detroit Pistons. Now, while his scoring was slightly down compared to previous seasons, Harris provided consistent production and a veteran leadership for the Pistons throughout the whole season. And I do not want to note, when telling the full story of his season this year with the Detroit Pistons, he had a slow start to the season, but in the second half absolutely turned it on. Ryan, to start the season, I was a little bit worried because, well, and if we remember, the Pistons started 0 for 4 to start the season. So we were coming in the year, hopefully this team's going to kind of step it up a notch. And then they start 0 for 4. And then Tobias Harris just kind of puts up a goose egg the first 15 games. I'm like absolutely worried. And then to see what he ended up doing against the New York Knicks and Karl-Anthony Towns, like you said, I was absolutely shocked. And he just played great. And when talking about that series, you have to talk about what he averaged, because it was absolute standout play. He averaged 15.7 points per game, so really 16 points, 7.7 rebounds, an assist, a steal, and 1.5 blocks while logging 38 minutes per game. That's from statmuse.com. Ryan, he played absolutely great against the Knicks. Why do you think that is? I mean, Karl-Anthony Towns, as much as he can be lazy, overall is pretty good defensively. Why do you think Tobias played so good against the Knicks? He played great.
To me, what it was is veteran leadership and experience. Experience goes a long ways in the NBA. It doesn't matter if you come into the NBA playing 4 years in college or in having that age range, or being a long-lasting NBA vet like a Udonis Haslem or any of those guys. They always have the experience. And guys that have experience excel in the NBA, especially in the playoffs, because it doesn't matter who it is. And to me, the experience went a long way. It really did. Because you think of Karl-Anthony Towns as an example. Cat doesn't have that playoff experience yet. He's seen the playoffs, a handful of times, probably pretty much my entire 5 fingers right there, because Minnesota wasn't doing much there. And now with the Knicks in his first season with them, he has one playoff stint per se. But I think the experience went a long ways for Tobias, because he's been there with Philly, he's been there with the Clippers, he's been there with the Pistons briefly before. So like, he has that experience of what to do on a day in, day out basis. And so I think the experience is what did it.
So as we head into the off season, there's a lot of questions, not as many as previous years, but one thing that does make me nervous is if Tobias Harris is going to cut it as the starting power forward as the Pistons progress and hopefully reach an Eastern Conference Finals in a year from now, or 2 years, 3 years from now. Ryan, as far as that topic, and of course we saw, Tobias play great against the Knicks. Do you think that when the Pistons make an Eastern Conference Finals, Tobias Harris is the starting power forward?
No, I don't think he's a starting power forward when that happens. Do I think he's on the team? I would say at least 50-50, if not a higher percentage than 50%. I think he is on the team. I don't necessarily know what role that will be, but I don't see him planning on leaving Detroit anytime soon or wanting to. There's a reason why he signed with the Pistons. And I think until the Pistons hit that, like, I guess, clear and evident goal that the whole reason why Tobias signed with them in the first place, until they reach that goal, I don't think he's going anywhere. And if that means he signs for the league minimum, he signs for the league minimum. Because I don't see him not on the Pistons. He's what, 34, 35 right now. So he has 2 years left on his contract on a 3-year deal. So that puts him at, let's say, 37 years old. I think at that point in time, if Langdon doesn't go like, okay, we can trade him for some pieces, I don't think he would. But I do see him on this team. He's not going to be the starter because 37 years old and still starting and playing at that high of a level, I don't think is going to happen out of Tobias. Because obviously there was the dip in his averages this year. That was evident. In the postseason, he went off again. But I do think he will be on the team. But again, who's to say what the role is going to be? But he's definitely not going to be the starting four.
All right. Before we give him his final season grade, I got to mention his best game of the season, rather. In a loss to the Hornets, he scored 26 points and 8 rebounds with some efficient shooting 47% from the field. Ryan, when talking about final season grade for Tobias Harris, we looked at the statistics, talked about positives and negatives, how there was a bit of dip in averages compared to his career. What final season grade are you giving Tobias Harris?
Ooh, see, this might be my second A+.
Okay.
To me, when you think of what we were going to get out of him and what we got, I was thinking to myself, okay, we're going to get a solid Tobias Harris. I don't know what this is going to look like stats-wise, but we're going to get a good player. And I never had any doubt in my mind at all of his abilities. But the only concern that I had going into the season was, is his age going to catch up to him a little bit? Because we saw that last year with Philly. There's a reason why Philly went the other direction and went after Paul George. There is a reason there. Granted, Daryl Morey doesn't know what he's doing. But Tobias, it was evident that it was time for them to move on from him. It was evident. Not because he's bad, but because they didn't see the value of committing to him like the Pistons committed to him this year in that contract that they signed him to, which really wasn't that much. But I know a lot of us Pistons fans were sitting there going like, okay, that's actually a lot. But so what he gave us, his leadership, his impact on the team, the establishing of a new culture that Langdon and Bickerstaff wanted to set out, and just his mindset and mentality night in, night out, starting the season off like absolute garbage, like we just wasted all that money on him for no reason, to backing down Karl Anthony Towns in the playoffs and limiting Cat to pretty much nothing at all. And being 34, 35 years old too. On top of that, I think to me it has to be an A+, because he did exactly what we wanted him to do, but he's honestly exceeded our expectations by honestly a landslide. It's not even close, at least to me, because when you go out and you pay someone that kind of money, you're expecting them to do good things. Honestly, you could even make the case for great things. But he did far more than just great things for this team, because he brought this team back to relevancy and he brought this team back to the playoffs. And it's been a long time since we've been there. And honestly, yes, Tim Hardaway Jr., that was a fantastic trade. Yes, Ron Holland, that was a decent draft pick. Yes, Malik Beasley, that was a fantastic signing. But I think this is where it is. I think this is by far the best move that Trajan Langdon has ever made in his career. The best move that Bickerstaff has went out and went like, hey, I want him on this team. I think Tobias Harris is Detroit. And it was evident when he first got here, and it's evident now that he is a Piston, and there's a reason why he is on this team and playing at a high level. So I think it has to be an A+.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's something about Tobias Harris in a Detroit Pistons jersey. He just always shines and plays so great. And I think the city of Detroit, is fully backing him. And we all love Tobias Harris and what he's given to the Pistons and how hard he's worked. It's shown on the court and off the court. And I think when looking at the Knicks series, the series doesn't go to 6 games without Tobias Harris. The worst game he had was third game of the series. He only had 8 points, but other than that, he had 17, 14, 17, 18 in that series. He played so great. And so I think the Pistons might be looking at a sweep or a gentleman's sweep if Tobias Harris isn't playing the way he was in that series. So I agree. Give him an A+, just from looking at the statistics, looking at what his role was on the Pistons team and my expectations heading into the season, he exceeded all of them. So I agree. A+ for Tobias Harris. That will do it for today's episode number 22 of season 3. Talked about Tim Hardaway Jr. and his season eval, Ron Holland Jr., and then also the great and powerful Tobias Harris in the city of Detroit. That will do it for today's episode. We'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.